Have you ever been in an argument where you knew, and I mean really knew, you were right? Like you remembered exactly what was said, you knew exactly what happened, you had the facts, and if it came down to it, you were ready to bring in witnesses, security footage, sworn testimony, like whatever it took. And somehow, even though you were right, by the time the conversation was over, everything was worse. That's something nobody tells you. There are times when being totally right is totally wrong. Wrong for the person you're arguing with, and wrong for your relationship. Now, I want to make it clear up front that I'm not saying truth doesn't matter. Truth matters a lot. There are things worth standing up for. There are times when something needs to be said, where situations where just pretending everything's fine isn't loving at all. The Bible talks about speaking the truth in love, and I think we need both halves of that phrase. Truth without love can turn out to be cruel. But love without truth isn't really love either. It's fake. It's smiling and pretending. It's avoiding the hard conversation because we don't want things to get uncomfortable. Real love can tell the truth. But here's where it gets complicated. Sometimes we're not actually fighting for the truth. We're fighting for the win. And those aren't always the same thing. Think about what happens in an argument. Somewhere along the way, the goal morphs into something different. Maybe the conversation started because something genuinely needed to get worked out. But now I need you to admit that I'm right. I need you to acknowledge you started this. I need you to understand I had a perfectly good reason for doing what I did. And I need to make sure I don't come out looking like the bad guy. And at that point, I'm not really solving anything anymore. I'm building a case. I've got evidence, and you've got yours, and I'm listening to you, sure, but I'm mostly listening for the weak spot in your argument so I can jump on it. You know what that's like. And maybe I win. Maybe you finally say, okay, fine, you're right. Great. Now what? Because one of the strangest things about relationships is that you can win the argument and still lose something that mattered a whole lot more. So why do we get so fixated on winning even when it does more harm than good? Usually because underneath it all, we're protecting something. My reputation, my pride, the idea that I'm the reasonable one here. And that's exhausting because now every disagreement becomes a threat I've got to defend against. But imagine letting that go. Imagine being able to say, I care more about us than winning this. Or like, help me understand why this hurt you. Paul describes Jesus doing something like that in Philippians 2. Not grasping at what was his, but emptying himself and taking on the posture of a servant for the sake of the people that he loved. That's the model. That's the template. Like once you've got nothing left to prove, you don't have to manipulate the conversation anymore. You can just be honest. There's a folk singer named David Wilcox who wrote a song about marriage called Start with the Ending. His idea really sounds backwards until you sit with it. He says the way to keep love alive is to treat it as though it's already over. What he means is once there's nothing left to lose, you don't need to defend yourself anymore because the truth isn't a threat to your survival. It's just truth. Once you stop performing and protecting yourself, here's what's left. You stop seeing the person across from you as someone to beat, and you start seeing them as a person again. And his song doesn't end in a breakup. It ends in an anniversary. Turns out clinging to the win can kill relationships. Letting go of it can save them. Here's what that actually looks like. Picture a couple arguing about money. She says he overspent, and she's right down to the dollar. And he knows it. But admitting that, it feels like losing. So instead, he goes digging for every time she's overspent, going back 3 years. Now, they're not trying to solve anything. They're just trying to win. Now it's an hour later, and they're not talking about money anymore. They're not talking at all. Now picture it differently. He stops building his case, and he says, "Babe, you're right. I spent more than we agreed, and I'm sorry. But is this maybe about more than money? Tell me what's going on." Now, that doesn't fix everything in one sentence, but for the first time, they're actually talking to each other instead of talking at each other. That's where speaking the truth in love becomes a lot more than just saying difficult things nicely. It becomes a whole posture. Truth says, let's be honest about what's real. Love says, I'm not going to use what's real to destroy you. So those two belong together. So what do we do? Just stop caring who's right? No. Right and wrong, they still matter, and they matter a lot. There are people you need to confront. There are boundaries you need to live in. There's injustices you need to call out. Love was never, ever pretending that none of that stuff is real. But maybe before we walk into one of those conversations, there's a better question than, how do I prove I'm right? Maybe the question is, what do I hope will happen when this is over? Do I want understanding? Do I want repair? Do I want something harmful to actually change? Or do I want us to be closer? Or do I just mostly want the satisfaction of hearing you say, you were right? Because those two goals will take you into two very different conversations. None of that promises that they'll meet you halfway. Ask it anyway. So it's not the truth you have to let go of, and it's not pretending that something doesn't matter. It's the need to defeat the person sitting in front of you and the relationship right along with them. Because once you stop pretending that you need to win, you're free. You're free to listen. You're free to admit where you were wrong. You're free to tell the truth without turning it into a weapon. And free to care more about the person than a scorecard. And maybe that's the other thing nobody tells you about being right. It's not that nobody's ever wrong, and it's not that we avoid the hard conversations. It's that eventually we become secure enough to stop treating every disagreement like something we have to win.